Train the muscles, not the joints. Welcome back to Natural Go Land Bodybuilding.
Mountain.
And thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. Thanks for tuning into these vlogs. They do take a lot of editing, and it takes me a bit of time to get them up and whatever, just because it has to do with filming in raw files, so that way I can get the different colors and all this stuff. So for those of you who appreciate that, I appreciate you too for tuning in. So thanks for that. God knows you could be doing something else, right? You could probably be doing something else right now rather than watching me on YouTube. So thanks. So anyway, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do some delts and some triceps, and then I'm going to do some walking lunges in the garden. I don't know if I'll bring you along for that. There's not a lot of talking when I'm doing walking lunges because I'm usually exhausted because it causes a lot of breathing. And I've tried it without breathing, but turns out you die if you don't breathe. So that's some wisdom right there for you. So anyway, yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some light dumbbells, just light 20-pound dumbbells for front raises, and then I'm going to go right into side raises. And after I do a few sets of that, then I'm going to go into some shoulder presses. Now, this begs the question, a lot of people say, well, geez, what do you start with the isolations first for? And I will say just because I feel like it, in the famous words of every 3-year-old is, why don't you start with compounds? Well, I don't want to, it works for 3-year-olds. And so that's what I'm going to say to you now. So anyway, I sometimes like to start with the isolations to burn out the shoulders. And once again, just by changing the order up in exercises, you make weird discoveries. Sometimes you just fatigue the muscle in a different, more creative way. It doesn't mean that I always do it this way, but today that's what I feel like doing. So yeah, I break my templates all the time. I just break free of the templates, and that keeps it interesting to me as well. And let's face it, once you've been doing this for a long time, it's very easy for workouts to become uninteresting. And usually when that happens, it's usually because you have stagnated into believing you know everything, or just doing the same stuff over and over again because you're afraid to change anything. And if you resist change too much, just like in life, sometimes you can stagnate and move backwards, right? So I like to experiment a bit. I haven't been doing a lot of front raises in my life. If anything, I've actually told you guys specifically, front raises are pretty much useless. But because I'm doing them with the pronated grip or pronated positioning of the hands, the action figure, positioning, I find that I'm getting a good trap burn and getting some nice front delt burn. And like I said, sometimes you just got to say, what the hell, like just do something different and see what happens. Honestly, I've been doing this for so long now that I just enjoy the play of tension. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like the dance of tension. So yeah, this is what I'm doing right now. It doesn't mean that it's the most effective in the world, but maybe it will turn out to be. And that's what I'm here to discover, right? That's it. So let's start with the first set. Now that felt pretty good, right? A good burn in the front delts and then right to side delts. So Sometimes just by being creative, even if it doesn't necessarily make strategic sense to you at the time, sometimes just trying things and finding out what happens is, it's not a bad strategy as long as you're not, hurting yourself, you know what I'm saying? So, don't jump off a cliff and then find out if that's a good strategy or not, or nut yourself with one of the dumbbells, Don't smash yourself in the groin with the dumbbells. That's probably not a good idea either. But I'm hoping I don't have to teach you guys that. But you never know. It is the internet. We are on the internet right now. So let's just say I'm never surprised at some of the comments I get. But anyway, as you noticed, I did a lot of reps there. And this is the one thing I think a lot of people should know. And that is certain isolation movements are going to have a certain rep threshold, meaning that if you are using heavy weights, like you can only do 15 reps or 10 reps or 5 reps with something, and you're using weight that forces you to use such low reps because it's just so much, certain movements don't do well with that, right? So for an example, back in the day, I used to do upright rows, but I noticed that once I went past 95 pounds or 115 pounds, then it would start to jam the shoulder in a weird way and cause more irritation than muscular adaptation. And that's just the way I'm built, right? You might be different. But I find that you'll notice that certain exercises, if you go heavier, it's not necessarily better. Sometimes it's way worse. And you'll notice this especially with certain isolation exercises, because isolation exercises are harder on the joints, but they can produce some really great results if you use the right weight. So don't be surprised if you can't apply the 5x5 principle to an isolation exercise, or even if you can't do a weight that forces you only to get 15 reps, right? If I start using 50-pound dumbbells and doing this, I notice it just feels different, and it just feels like it's not necessary, and it puts stress on the wrong part of the body. I start to feel stress more in the joints and stuff. So when I start to go a bit heavier, I do that with my compound lifts and not as much with the isolations. And like I said, not all isolations are created equal. Some of them, you'll find you just have to use higher rep ranges, like 25, 30, 40 reps. And then some of them, you find they have a different threshold. You can do 10 rep sets or 8 rep sets and you're okay. So it's up to you to experiment and find this out. But when we're talking about the shoulders, I find when you're doing isolation with shoulders, it isn't a bad idea to stick to medium to higher rep ranges. Now, the neat side effect of doing isolations first, especially with the shoulders, before I do shoulder presses, is that I get this benefit of fatiguing my delts quite a bit. And then when I go to shoulder press, I'm basically ensuring that my delts are going to hit failure before my upper muscles and my neck, because I find, especially with standing shoulder presses, I use a lot of neck muscles and so forth, and some of the upper trap and stuff. But if you really want to isolate those delts, by isolating them first, doing a lot of front delt work, and then going to the shoulder presses, yes, you're going to be weaker on the shoulder press, but your delt is going to definitely be hitting failure, and you're going to be concentrating a lot of the fatigue and exhaustion in that area. So it's a good change up, right? It's called pre-exhaustion, right? It's a good change up to pre-exhaust the muscle that you want to hit and ensure that it is hitting the most amount of stress during a certain given workout. So yeah, let's do another set here. Now the neat part is sometimes when you do a different movement than normal. Yeah, sorry, I was having a flashback there from the set. I was going back in time to the set, and sorry about that. Again, it boils down to the bodybuilder thing. Like when the blood leaves your head and you're in a perpetual haze of stupidity, usually you're making good muscular gains. So sorry about that. It just happens. But anyway, the bottom line is that sometimes when you step out of your comfort zone, try a new exercise. Sometimes you're trying higher reps, like I did. I did just 25 pounders for the front raises and then going right into the side raises. Sometimes when you do this, you accidentally rehabilitate certain injuries that you thought were permanent or you had. That's the funny thing. Sometimes an injury is not an injury. Sometimes an injury is just one area struggling to keep up with another in strength. So it is good for you to break free of the comfort zone, because sometimes when you do so, you accidentally stumble across ways of balancing out the physique, balancing out the muscles, and rehabilitating some of those nagging injuries you may have had for a long time. So I noticed by doing front raises that my bench press feels just slightly different somehow. You know, who knows what that's going to translate into, but it can translate into even stronger delts, stronger stabilizer muscles, and so forth. So just because you're using lightweight and just because you might be doing an angle that is not necessarily perfect on paper, maybe it is the right thing for you to rehabilitate an injury. And because we know if you're doing front delts like this too, the tension on the delts or the front delt is going to be different than when you're just bench pressing like this, right? Or shoulder pressing. Because you're stretching the delt and then you're bringing it all the way up, right? Or, you know, not all the way up, but most of the way up. I mean, some people do it all the way up like this, but I don't really see the point for myself right now. I find here is pretty much the perfect form. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is those different angles where you use lighter weight, sometimes just work with different planes of motion, that can lead you to rehabilitating an area. Now, I'll give you an example of this too. A long time ago, I had a lower back issue. As far as my lower back was basically hurting quite a bit when I was training, or it wasn't necessarily stable. Like I could feel it was always this nagging sort of weak link in my training. And then when I went to go do a construction job, I was forced to lift 100 to 200 pounds on one side of my shoulders, right, on my back. And I'd walk with this panel all day long, back and forth, up and down hills. And I'd alternate shoulders. I'd go back and forth to make sure I wasn't creating any imbalances. But because I was working these side muscles, the muscles responsible for bending to the side and lifting the weight sideways, and I was twisting the hips just slightly, just a little bit, not too aggressively, what happened was my lower back became totally rehabilitated, right? But if I just applied the bodybuilder mindset, I just would have looked at that and said, oh, it's useless, there's not enough weight, and I'm not lifting 500 pounds on my back, what's the point, right? But the whole point was that it strengthened up some of those muscles that were lagging behind, and then it helped my other main lifts after that become more stable. And funny enough, it helped me be able to lift more weight safely. So that's why this experimentation that you see me do is so important. Can you see myself? See, I'm growing right now. You can see, like, watch. See, you see that? I'm not even flexing right now. It just happened by accident. Yeah. And that's not my bike. It's not my bike. You guys keep on asking me about my bike. That's not my bike. Okay? Just so you know, that's just not my bike. Just give it a rest, right? See, I'm still big from the last set. See, look, I'm still big. See, yeah. So yeah, in some cases, as much as I am all about heavy weight and getting stronger and so forth, there will be some times where you'll get more gains out of using lighter weight with that right isolation movement. And so that's why it's important to, play around, find out, what feels right. Like right now I can feel my delts are just pumped up. My neck is pumped up. But funny enough, I never really realized this before, but when I get to the 25 pounders, I'll tell you, the forearms just get massacred from doing these pronated front raises, right? So if you want to work the forearms at the same time as get some shoulders in, it's an option, right? As long as you're not doing this. If you're doing this, as you're raising your arms, then you probably shouldn't be doing front delts. You probably get kicked out of the gym. But if you're strong enough or alpha enough to keep your wrists straight, then you'll probably get a good amount of forearm work from those front delts. But yeah, if you're doing this, just don't even go to the gym, just stay home. Yeah, it's probably a better idea. So yeah, now I'm gonna go to shoulder presses, and just follow me over to the rack. Now another genius tip I'm gonna share with you, and this is like absolute gold, okay? So if you haven't sent in your $495,000 yet to naturalgalantbodybuilding.com, please do so. I mean, you can do so right now. Right now if you want, I'll just wait. My phone's not dinging yet. If my phone's not dinging, that means that you guys haven't, well, maybe you just got to juggle some assets around or something. But yeah, make sure you send that to my website. I'll be waiting patiently. So yeah, anyway, this gold tip is that sometimes when you pre-exhaust a muscle, obviously you don't have to go as heavy on the primary lift in order to get the same type of adaptation in the muscle, or at least similar, okay? So you'll see this with a lot of pro bodybuilders. They'll do leg extensions and they'll do a lot of leg curls and they'll do a lot of isolation movements first, and then they'll go to squat because that helps them push their legs into a deeper level of failure, but at the same time, they don't have to use quite as heavy amount of weight, so they don't have to worry about injuries to the lower back and so forth, right? So because they're really trying to make sure that their legs are hitting failure and that their lower back isn't at risk for an injury. And because they're using such huge poundages, at some point, they start to make these strategic decisions. Now, you can make this decision for another reason. One is just to get a different form of stimulation on a muscle group. But one of the reasons why I find this strategy is great for shoulder presses, for myself, especially standing shoulder presses, is that I find when I go above a certain threshold of weight, it starts to cut the circulation off, right? I don't know if you've seen guys when they're doing shoulder presses heavy and then they just pass out. Well, I noticed that when I'm doing standing shoulder presses at 185 and above, I start to get like, I think the muscles in my neck just get tense and they start to cut off the circulation or something. So it's better for me to do heavy shoulder presses as I'm seated. And so by pre-exhausting the delts, I can do 135 on the shoulder press, get a great workout, but I'm not really forced to go into the heavier weights, right? So you'll see me do 135, 155 regularly on standing shoulder presses, but I find once I get into the heavier weights, it's kind of counterproductive for me because I start bringing in the neck too much. And that of course could have something to do with my shoulder dislocation and whatever. But without getting into that, the whole point is that I embrace what is. Sometimes I don't know why, but I just embrace what is and then develop strategies around that. And you are better off doing that than going around in circles trying to figure out what the hell's going on, Just embrace what is first, make logical steps or make allowances for what's happening. And then from there, at some point, let's just say the wisdom will come to you where you start to understand what is happening and why. And like I said, I think I have some good ideas of what's happening when I do standing shoulder presses with heavy weight, but you might have some other different issue that you need to contemplate, and only through making sure you pay attention and not hurt yourself first and foremost, can you be around long enough to accumulate the wisdom, right? It's pretty simple. Makes sense, right? So anyway, let's do a set. Am I big yet? Am I big? Yeah. I don't know where I am. Actually, that felt pretty light. It was actually pretty good. But as you can see, there are some very real reasons to sometimes pre-exhaust a muscle. And if you're noticing that you have a certain exercise where there's something happening in the exercise that is preventing you from taking a certain muscle to failure. So say, let's just use a simple example. Say it's bench presses and you're noticing that your triceps are always hitting failure first, or your delts, and you've tried all the different ranges of motion, different grips, all this sort of thing. Well, then one very sound strategy is the pre-exhaustion with some type of fly first for several sets, and then you do your straight sets of bench. Or you can do a set of flies first and then go right into bench with a little bit of a lower weight, of course, because your chest is going to be fatigued, and that will ensure that your chest is hitting failure first. So yeah, look at all your exercises, look at what you're doing, and really see what is hitting failure. And look at how your physique is developing. If your physique is developing a certain way, and you've got some strengths and some weaknesses, look at the exercises you're doing for the weak body parts and see if the muscles that you're training are actually hitting failure, or is it another muscle group, like another assisting muscle group coming into play, and that's what's dictating your end of your set, right? So say I'm doing tricep kickbacks, for instance, right, for triceps, but say my delt is hitting fatigue first, say my rear delt, well then obviously I can't take the set as deep into failure for the triceps. So it's like that. You really want to strategically look at these things, and regardless of what decision you make, at least you're becoming conscious of what's happening, and that's really the most important thing. One could argue what you need to have for a strong body part or a weak body part, or what is balance, like who cares about any of that stuff? But if you can deepen the connection to your body so that you're really conscious and aware of what's happening, it happens to bring more enthusiasm and exhilaration around pumping the muscles. It's like playing a musical instrument. When you play a musical instrument, you can choose to play songs, but sometimes it's fun just to play and create your own melodies, and you can do this with your own muscularity and your own fitness. All right, another set. See, after I drop gems like that, I got to do another set. Pretty soon I'm going to be signing autographs, honestly. I'm going to be signing autographs on trees and stuff before I throw them down to Idaho, California. A lot of my trees need to go to California, 100%. Like just torpedo those things. And there's a lot of other places, I could throw some trees too, just like javelin the thing. That's why I train shoulders, so I could javelin those trees to countries all around the world. And then, I'll sign the tree so that way you guys have an autograph, So if a tree lands on your neighbor's house, that was me. That was me. I think I'm going to do one more because the world needs more of this Yeah. Now, of course, just because I'm talking about pre-exhaustion for certain exercises or as a strategy to hit certain muscle groups, it of course doesn't replace heavy weight altogether. So I still recommend that you do sets of 6 to 8 reps from time to time with your compound lifts, just straight lifts like that, not especially if I'm talking to guys. Girls, I find usually the clients that I trained back in the past, I found they benefit from a bit of a higher rep range because they usually, and I know it's impossible to generalize 100%, but they usually have or an ability to do more reps with a higher percentage of their 1 rep max. But regardless, I'm just saying that for a couple of the girls that might be watching. But really what I'm saying is that sometimes there's a fallacy around just because something's hard, it's the same as heavy weight. Just because I've exhausted the muscle so much I can only do 6 reps with this or whatever, it's not the same as doing 6 reps with super heavy weight. That's all I'm saying. Like say I go to the rack fresh and I can lift double the weight for 6 reps. It doesn't do the same thing as when I'm just lifting light, and because I'm so exhausted, I'm only getting 6 reps. So let's use another example. Say I'm squatting and I'm fresh and I go to do my squats after I'm warmed up, and I'm doing, sets of 5 or 6 reps with 500 pounds. And then another day I go for a run, I run 10 miles and then I go right into my squat workout and I'm, down by 150 to 175 pounds in my lifts for sets of 5. It's not going to be the same. It won't be the same type of stress on the leg if I'm doing 5 reps with 325 or 350 pounds as opposed to 500, right? So weight does matter sometimes. It doesn't always matter, but sometimes it does matter. So yeah, that's why I always say mix the shit up, mix it up, because I've seen lots of guys get lost in the whole, they find a technique that works for them and then they stick with it, even though it starts to not work for them anymore. And they forget the foundation of training that got them to this point. And then when they start using some of these isolation movements, they're great once they have that foundation. But if they didn't have the foundation, these isolation movements wouldn't have been as effective. And so once they start taking the foundation movements out and they just stick with these isolations, sometimes they'll lose some of their muscle mass until they start incorporating these foundational lifts again. So it is important for you to, let's just say, remember the basics that got you to where you are, and then elaborate or get into some other isolation or specificity work. Say that 1,000 times. Specificity. Specificity. I feel like Garth from Wayne's World. Okay, one more set, and then I'll do some triceps, and then I'm gonna go and do the walking lunges and go die on the lawn. And the nice part about the lawn that I have this nice lawn there. And like I said before, it's great because walking lunges out there, one day, if you're doing walking lunges and you're on a lawn, you just have to dig a little bit of a hole. So that way, once you're done your set and you feel like you're gonna die, you just roll into the hole and then that's it, it's all done. No fuss, no muss, right? No funeral, nothing. That's it. I trained myself into death. Done. Now for triceps, I'm going to do some incline tricep extensions or skull crushers, incline skull crushers. And you guys have seen me do these a lot. But one thing I will say is that sometimes it's good to cycle the volume in your training. So say you notice that one body part is lagging behind, or perhaps you haven't paid attention to certain aspects of that body part for a bit. There's nothing wrong with doing a little bit more volume for that body part and then having a bit less volume for the other body parts you're doing in that workout. And again, this is a way of just keeping it fresh and keeping it interesting to you. But at the same time, you're getting the benefit of some extra volume on an area, but you're not getting the burnout, because the big trap that a lot of people get caught in is they play the volume game and then they feel obligated to do volume all the time and to steadily increase volume, and then of course they burn out. So I think you're better off sticking to the 80-20 rule as far as most of your workouts are intense with a lower amount of sets, and then 20% of the time you'll take a workout and you'll add some extra volume and so forth. So you saw me do it with shoulders, right? I did about 3 sets of that giant set of front and side delt raises. And then I went to 3 sets of shoulder presses. And now I'm just gonna do 3 sets for triceps. That's it, because I did a bit more sets for my shoulder. So I'll just do 3 sets for triceps, and then I'll move on to legs, because I know how much legs are gonna take out of me. And I'm only gonna do about 3 sets of walking lunges, but walking lunges with dumbbells, 70-pound dumbbells on a bumpy lawn is always good to make me never want to work out again. That's usually the way it is. So anyway, I'm going to get this done and then I will move over and do some leg stuff. But because you only have so much energy in one individual workout, you want to make sure that you're not doing too much volume. So usually I'd say about 45 minutes to 60 minutes of training, maybe an hour and 15, but once you start getting over an hour, you're starting to push it. You're starting to push that volume a bit too much. And remember, as a bodybuilder, or a natural bodybuilder, you're first and foremost not an endurance athlete. You're more an anaerobic athlete, and you want to stress the muscle, but you don't want to take it into an endurance side of things. Strength endurance is one thing, but absolute endurance, where you're constantly just doing set after set after set, there's a massive point of diminishing return, and you may feel that you hit overtraining and go backwards, because the body gets too stressed out and gets overtrained, right? So the body, first and foremost, is always thinking survival. And if you're giving it a massive amount of volume, it's going to adapt to be able to do that volume, and it's going to compromise. And sometimes the best way to do more volume is to get weaker because then you won't be lifting as much weight, but at least you can last longer, right? So these are the type of compromises that the body will make at some point if you go too far into the endurance category. So you can see that this is another way that you could do some tricep skull crushers, and then you can go right into a dip of some sort. The squat rack wasn't exactly the best type of dip, but you kind of get the idea, right? You go right from your isolation into a compound lift of some sort, and then make sure that that tricep gets, pushed to failure. Because sometimes when you're doing skull crushers, sometimes the stabilizer muscles in the shoulder start to come into play. Sometimes the lats, the pec minor, all these different little muscles that that also contribute to the overall movement. And I find that sometimes I hit a certain level of failure, but I could push the tricep just a bit more if I start doing a pushing movement of some sort. And that's where bench dip right after the exercise really works really well. So this is just another strategy you can employ if you're noticing that your triceps aren't hitting failure during skull crushers. You just add this right at the end, and that gives you just that little bit of stress that you might need. But yeah, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do one more set of this, and then I'm gonna go do some walking lunges. So I'm gonna leave you guys with that. Thanks a lot for tuning into this workout vlog. I'm gonna make more of these, so keep coming back if you can. I'd appreciate it. I mean, there's not much point in me telling bad jokes to nobody, you know what I'm saying? And so if you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalglambodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. Mountain, am I bigger yet? Hey?